Hi, my name is Naylor, and this is the Performing Songwriter. My guest today is Sarah McQuaid. Sarah was born in Spain, grew up in the U.S., lived in Ireland for 13 years, and now lives in England. Her initial recordings and performances focused heavily on traditional songs and instrumentals, with her last two albums focusing on her original songs as well as traditional songs. Jeff Wallace of F-Roots said of my guest, brilliant musicianship, a warm and welcoming stage presence, and a voice as rich, matured, and knowing as the finest thrice distilled Irish malt whiskey. I'll be back in a minute to talk to Sarah, and we will also hear a mini concert after our talk. Sarah, thank you very much for being a guest.
Thank you so much, Ray. Thanks for having me on your show.
Now, you're on an 8-week tour of the U.S., is that correct?
Yeah, as we're speaking, I'm 3 weeks into an 8-week tour, coast to coast, starting and finishing in Texas and covering everything from the Midwest, East Coast, we go over through places like South Dakota and Idaho and into Washington State, and then down the West Coast to California, and then back again through Arizona and New Mexico back to Texas, where we finish up and fly home to England.
Wow. I was going to ask you, I gave a brief introduction there. Could you talk a little bit about your history of your music over the time that you've been performing and up to the present?
Well, let's see. I mean, if we go way back, I sang in a children's choir when I was little, the Chicago Children's Choir, and that was a really good musical education for me and a really good performance education for me as well, because we used to go off on tour for just 10 days at a time, but it would be a very intensive schedule with concerts and school workshops and local television tapings, lots going on, and then concerts every evening, and being parceled off to host families and sleeping in a different bed every night and getting up in the morning and doing it again. So that was an early education in that life for me. And I guess I started writing songs pretty early on. I think I wrote my first song when I was 8. I think it was absolutely terrible. But I kept writing songs. As a teenager, kind of got really all into Joni Mitchell and stuff like that, and was also very interested in the guitar. Was listening in a lot to kind of Windham Hill recordings artists like Michael Hedges and Alex DeGrassi, people like that, and trying open tunings and so on. And then as a teenager, I went over to study in France for a year, and quite accidentally wound up playing with a traditional Irish band based in Strasbourg, France, where I was studying. That kind of got me very excited about Irish music, again, particularly from an instrumental guitar point of view. And I wound up writing a book about the Dadgad tuning, D-A-D, G-A-D, which is the tuning that I always play in D. It's a D-A-D, G-A-D.
Actually, I bought the book recently.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was it any good to you?
Well, I haven't opened it up. I've opened it up, but I haven't had a chance to work on it. But I always wanted to learn that tuning.
What I'd really like to do is do a follow-up book that would focus on song accompaniment, and call it the Dadgad Songbook or something like that. I've been talking with the publishers about that, but haven't got anything definite out of them yet. So hopefully I can do that soon, because a lot of people have been asking about such a thing. But I actually, I recorded my first solo album in 1996, and it was released in 97 very quietly. It got some lovely reviews, but I got offered a full-time job it was supposed to be a temporary job. It was supposed to be a 3-month position working for a magazine publishing house. And I wound up staying in that job for 11 years before I eventually quit to become a full-time musician. So there was a huge gap between my first album, which was mostly traditional Irish material, plus one of my own songs, and my second album, which was mostly traditional American material and old-time Appalachian stuff, plus 2 of my own songs. And then, meanwhile, I became a full-time musician. My first album was re-released and did really well on the re-release. I went off to record the second album, and then I moved around that time over to England and met up with a woman called Zoe, who comes from the pop music end of the spectrum. She had a huge hit single back in 1991 with a song that she wrote and performed called Sunshine on a Rainy Day, which was a
What's her last name?
huge chart hit. Her last name is Pollock.
Okay.
Zoe Pollock is her name, but she just recorded under the name Zoe by itself. And she had this massive hit, which was also used on a Volkswagen commercial, and it was the big kind of get everybody out on the dance floor number in all the discos in Ibiza and places like that. And she and I met because our kids were going to the same tiny little school, and we started writing songs together, and it was working with Zoe, co-writing with her, that really made me start to think of myself for the first time as a songwriter, as opposed to as a person who was a folk singer who occasionally wrote a song. We released the album under the name Mama. The album is called Crow, Coyote, Buffalo, and got great reviews. We never toured it. We never performed live. We did 1 or 2 live gigs right around the time of the album launch, but we never toured the album or became kind of a functioning band in any sense of the word. But the album was really a really crucial turning point to me, because it was after I made that Mama album with Zoe that the subsequent albums that I made as a solo artist started focusing on my own songwriting. The Plum Tree and the Rose, my third album, had 9 of my own songs on it. My new album, Walking into White, which just came out in the USA in August and has been getting amazing reviews, it's almost all my own songs except for 2 tracks. I do a hymn and I do a cover of Ewan McCall's The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. But other than that, it's all my own songs.
Okay.
Long answer to a short question.
I wanted to ask you about your songwriting. You mentioned that you started really as a child. Would you say that your songwriting process has it been more an evolution, or shall we say, in a certain way, a revolution, in the sense of it was a certain time that you said to yourself, "Wow," and you kind of mentioned that you became a real songwriter at a certain point. Was there anything about that time period that kind of really made you change from being a traditional person to a songwriter per se?
I'd say it was working with Zoe on the Mama album, because she really opened my mind as far as songwriting is concerned, because she's an incredibly talented songwriter. I mean, she's authored 1 major chart hit and quite a few other kind of minor hits, which were still brilliant songs, just didn't achieve the massive success that Sunshine on a Rainy Day did. But she taught me so much about songwriting. She taught me that prior to working with Zoe, I was under the vague impression, and if I'd thought about it, I could have realized I was wrong, because I love all of the great songwriters like, Rodgers and Hart and people like that, Carole King. But I kind of, for some reason, had got the idea that songs kind of had to have verses and chorus, 2 or 3 verses and a chorus and a middle 8, and I was kind of locked into quite traditional songwriting structures. And Zoe really opened my mind to the fact that as long as you have a structure, it doesn't matter what that structure is. I mean, a song has to follow a pattern, but you can set the pattern any way you like, so long as there's something, for the listener to kind of attach to. So that was absolutely fantastic, and we used a lot of different songwriting forms on that Mama album. There's even there's tracks that include spoken word. There are all kinds of different structures, and sometimes the structure would change. There's one song that we actually recorded in the studio for the album, and then messed around like crazy with the structure of the song at the mix stage. Actually, sort of chopped it up into parts and mixed the parts around in a different order, and that was just really educational. And then other influences on my songwriting would be when I was recording The Plum Tree and the Rose. I co-wrote 3 of the tracks for that album with Jerry O'Byrne, who produced all 3 of my earlier solo albums. He produced my first album, When Two Lovers Meet, the second one, I Won't Go Home Till Morning, and the third one, The Plum Tree and the Rose. And co-writing with him taught me a lot as well. And then for the new album, I co-wrote one song with Jerry for the new album because I wanted to have some continuity with the previous ones. But I also wanted to work with a different producer. And when I called Jerry up to tell him that, he said, actually, I was going to tell you before you said anything that you should really work with a new producer. We've made 3 albums together and it's been lovely, but I think we've kind of taken it as far as it can go. And you need to work with somebody different to kind of broaden your horizons a bit. So I asked my cousin, Adam Pierce, who's also an amazing songwriter and composer and musician, multi-instrumentalist and producer. I asked him if he would produce the new album, and he very kindly agreed. And when I went into the studio with mostly finished songs. I think I had 2 songs that I hadn't quite finished when we went in to record. But in the studio recording with Adam as well, he taught me huge amounts. He chopped my songs unmercifully. They all started out about twice as long as they finished. He would take a 5-minute song and cut it down to 2.5 minutes by chopping out everything unnecessary. And it was a slightly painful process for me, but it was such a healthy and good process for the finished result. I feel like he really did strip the songs down to their essences, and the results. I'm happier with this new album than I've been with anything I've done before, and the new album's got very favorably reviewed as well. But the reviews of the previous albums got favorably reviewed as well. But the reviews of the new album sort of go into levels of superlatives.
I wanted to ask you. You're reading, I guess, your website. Your performances have, if I understand it right, have been kind of described as really developing an intimate experience, relationship with your audience. And I wondered if you could talk about maybe a performance that you really remember, that you really enjoyed, that made a special impact upon you.
Ooh, that's a tough one, because I love performing. I love the relationship that you get with the audience. I love it when audiences talk back to me. That can be kind of wonderful. I'm struggling. I'm going to talk over to Martin, my wonderful tour manager and sound engineer. Martin, does any performance stand out for you? I mean, even on this tour, there have been some wonderful ones, like Deep Gap, North Carolina. Oh, I'll tell you what. Here's a great one. Deep Gap, North Carolina. I played just a few nights ago, last Saturday night, and it's a venue I'd played before, a wonderful clubhouse on top of a mountain called Powderhorn Mountain, and I had a request from a radio station in England to do kind of a happy birthday greeting for them, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to do it on stage with an audience? They were just saying, just record into a voice memo a happy birthday, and say where you are and stuff. But we decided to do it on stage. And so right before I did my final song of the night, I said to the audience, listen, I've got this request from a radio station. Would you guys join me in singing happy birthday to this radio station in England? And of course, they were totally tickled at the notion. We explained that we were recording it, and we got this massive chorus of happy birthday, and it was a great night. There were a lovely audience before they even did that for me. But I love it when people harmonize with me as well. I do some songs that kind of call out for 4-part gospel choir style harmony, and sometimes people do, and sometimes people start singing along and harmonizing to my own songs that I've written, and that's just amazing for me when that happens.
We're going to have you perform some of your songs now, and so your audience is me and whoever's in the room with you. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about our next show's performer. And we're going to show a slideshow of her with one of her songs underneath. And her name is Cynthia G. Mason. She's from Philadelphia, and she'll be right here in the studio. She has also received a number of rave reviews from a number of publications, including the Performing Songwriter, which I believe now is online, and also the Philadelphia Inquirer. So we're going to take a look at some of her photographs and underneath we'll hear one of her songs. As a matter of fact, it's called Like a Lifer Out for Good, and that's from her CD, Quitter's Claim. So here we go, and we'll be back with Sarah.
Just as the drive was meant to hold up, some illusion of intent while I was swayed, and I held to my place like a lifer out for good. But good was hinging on concessions that I made. Now I'll put my right hand up on the dashboard, put a semblance of an oath together here. If by chance I should aggravate the luck that leaves me baffled, I'll just keep my cash and my superstitions near. Left that inclination. I left the vague idea that we'd be off somewhere. When I got out of place, that event lost its effect. It was just an anecdote, not the thing that drove me there.
By the providential nature of the choices that I didn't think I made. Sometimes it's good to miss the boat. The ship that sails could fail to float. The job that you were after was a trap, and you'll be happier without it. I don't mind the sun not shining. I can see the silver lining through the rain. There's no method to my madness, and I can't help feeling sad when things don't turn out quite the way I thought I planned them. But when I look back on my life, I see things in a different light. Nothing's ever wasted, 'cause one day you might be grateful that you did it. I don't mind the sun not shining. I can see the silver lining through the rain. We've been through some heavy weather, running hard and falling far behind. But up ahead the clouds are lifting, and they say the wind is shifting. I believe the wrong things happen at the right time. That was The Silver Lining. It's from my new album, Walking into White. And I'm going to play now another one from the new album. Well, everything I'm going to be playing is from the new album. I'm going to play another track from that album. And this one is one of 3 songs that I wrote for the new album after reading aloud a series of books to my children called the Swallows and Amazons series. They were written in the 1920s and 30s by a guy called Arthur Ransom. And situations, as I was reading them aloud to my kids a chapter a night at bedtime, situations in the books kept striking me as kind of wonderful metaphors for life. And so this one comes out of the 3 books in the series that are all set in a part of England called the Norfolk Broads. And the Norfolk Broads are a network of tidally influenced waterways. So when the tide is in, you can sail your boat around in them. But then when the tide goes out, it goes out really quickly. And if you're not careful, you can get stuck in the mud. And if you get stuck in the mud, there's absolutely nothing you can do except sit there in the mud in your boat and wait for the tide to come back in and lift you out of the mud that you're stuck in. And I thought that just kind of cried out to have a song written about it. So I wrote one, and it's called The Tide. These tidal waters tell a lie. Their broad and shining surface hides a narrow path through muddy shallows marked by secret signs. Channel twists and turns, and heaven help you if you try to find a shorter way across, or if you fail to read the signs, you run aground with no way out until the turning of the tide. But the tide will rise in tide. Be ready with your boat to meet it. Feel the water lift you till you're floating free. Hoist your sail and find a channel deep enough to carry you to open sea. There's been time for many tides to fall and rise since you and I fetched up in shallow waters that have muddied up our lives. The channel flows just out of reach inside of where we lie, and watch so many ships and sailors gliding effortlessly by. They glance at us with pity in their sad and knowing eyes. But the tide will rise in tide. We'll be ready with our boat to meet it. Feel the water lift us till we're floating free. We'll hoist our sail and find a channel deep enough to carry us to open sea. The tide will rise in tide. We'll be ready with our boat to meet it. Feel the water lift us till we're floating free. We'll hoist our sail and find a channel deep enough to carry us to open sea. I'm going to do another Swallows and Amazons inspired song. This one is actually the title track of the new album. It's called Walking into White, and it comes out of the second book in the Swallows and Amazons series, which is called Swallowdale. And in it, two children get lost in the fog. They're walking home from being out mountain climbing all day, and they're walking across a moor, and this great big bank of fog rolls down off the moor and surrounds them. And they find themselves walking through this thick white mist, and they can't see anything in front of them, and they can't see anything behind them, and they don't even know if they're still walking in the right direction. And I was reading that aloud to the kids, and I thought to myself, that's actually how I feel a lot of the time as I go through life. I just have no idea what's ahead of me, and I'm just kind of groping my way blindly forward and desperately hoping that I'm headed in the right direction. So I'm going to sing that, and before I sing it, I'm going to sing the first of 3 little a cappella interludes that I put on the new album. I went into the studio with an a cappella song that I'd written as one complete song, and my cousin Adam Pierce, the producer, he said, why don't you split that song up into 3 parts and have each part be a kind of a little in-betweeny bit between 2 other tracks. And that worked so well that actually on this current tour I've been performing the new album live, track for track, as the first half of every show on the tour, and then the second half I kind of mix it up with all the previous albums. But so I'm going to sing one of those little a cappella interludes, the first of them, and then I'm going to go straight from there into Walking into White. The sweetness of the berry doesn't take away the pain of the briar when it stabs you in the hand, but the power of your craving for the fruit among the thorns is driving you to risk another chance. Sweetness and pain, summer sun and autumn rain. They hadn't long to go that afternoon. The light on the moor was gold, the distant mountains shone. They were chatting as they strolled and made believe of ships and days of old and pirate thieves. The boy glanced back the way they'd come. He said, hello, that's strange. The hill he just walked down is gone. The clouds have blotted out the sun, and everything has changed. The fog came down, a white cloud on the ground. She said, we'll be alright, just keep walking into white. be alright. Just keep walking into white. I'm going to do another the remaining two of the three a cappella interludes that together make up the song Sweetness and Pain. On the album there's Sweetness and Pain 1, Sweetness and Pain 2, and Sweetness and Pain 3. And they're going to be bookending a song that I co-wrote with Jerry O'Byrne, who produced all three of my earlier solo albums. And as I said earlier, I wanted to have some continuity with those albums when I went in to record the new one with my cousin Adam Pierce. And so I asked Jerry if he would co-write a song with me, and he said yes. And the only difficulty was that he was in Ireland and I was in England, so we had to co-write the song via email. We'd send each other over back and forth kind of MP3 recordings and little bits of lyrics and little guitar runs and so on, and we argued like crazy over that song. I think it took us about 6 weeks till we had a song that we were able to agree on. But we got there eventually, and it's called Leave It for Another Day. So I'm going to sing that song for you in a moment, but first I'll sing this. The bramble does not seek to harm, it merely seeks to live. It ensures without malice or intention. There's no question of forgiveness, no apology, no pardon, for minor wounds too numerous to mention. Sweetness and pain, winter winds return again. I can't begin to explain, wouldn't know what words to say. Leave it for another day. And there is no plan that I can understand. Why do we go on this way? Leave it for another day. I see you in the morning, still haunted by the night. I touch your face to tell you it's alright. Remember when we lay in the woods all night? We stumbled home across the fields, happy and bleary-eyed. The mist around our feet lay heavy on the ground. We floated through the cold gray air, suspended on a cloud. You come to me in the morning, still haunted by the night. I touch your face to tell you it's alright. might touch your face to tell you it's alright. Sharp black thorns concealed and smoothed by softly falling snow. Drops of blood like bright red flowers. This hurt will pass. Just let it go. Sweetness and pain. Shake it off and start again. Thank you.
Someone wrote about you, and they said that you were a triple threat. She does three things extremely well: sing, play guitar, and write songs. And I think we've just seen the true nature of that.
Thank you so much, Ray.
You're welcome. If people want to purchase your recordings, see where you're playing, what's the best way to do that?
Well, I have my main website, which is sarahmcquaid.com. That's sarahmcquaid.com. I'm also on Facebook at Sarah McQuaid Music, and I'm also on Twitter at Sarah McQuaid.
And Reverb Nation, I know.
Oh yeah, that too. I always forget Reverb Nation. And SoundCloud. Oh, and YouTube. I'm on YouTube.com.
You are, and you have some really nice videos.
I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm everywhere.
I just wanted to mention before we go, Cynthia G. Mason will be my guest next time. Sarah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ray. It's been really nice chatting to you and playing for you. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Okay. Bye-bye.